Greetings to all, and welcome to our final chapter of this year's wine club shipments for Hillcrest, Cellar 44. We are going to finish up with, I think, one of the all-time favorites and a wine that really plays into Hillcrest history to start with. Then we're going to move into a very, very rare old Italian grape varietal that is almost impossible to find as a standalone. We're going to taste that and then finish up with beautiful Riesling. A couple of these wines are really geared towards summer, and we'll kind of address that as we kind of get into it. So with that, I'd like to say, let's get started. So many of you remember the 2013 Malbec. That was a wine that was really spectacular, one of the great wines I think I've made here in Oregon, and a variety that I really believe is the future of Umpqua Valley, a variety that can really make wines that are world-class consistently. That wine, as a matter of fact, was picked up. We released that wine, the 2013, right on the front end of 2020, and Oregon Wine Board selected it as one of 6 wines to present to 200 wine writers internationally. And that was the only wine out of the Umpqua, and that wine, I still have people come up and talk to me about that wine that were in the tasting. It was an online tasting. But 2019 of our old school Malbec is what we're going to start with here. Richard Summers, as many of you know, planted 35 varieties when he first came up here from California, almost everything off of Old Man Louis Martini's vineyard, Stanley Ranch, which is down in the southern end of Napa. And I was just telling somebody recently that's in the trade that once we had come up here, Richard, of course, was very famous for his Riesling as well as for his Pinot, and the first Pinot produced in Oregon, of course, and planted. But I asked Richard, of all those varieties that he planted, and he made each one into separate lots of wine, and that if he would plant a couple of those again, say 3 of them, what would they be? And he always said Malbec, Malbec, Malbec. And Malbec, of course, is a world-class great grape, has incredible history. A lot of people aren't aware of, but that's a variety that I've come to see that same magic and beauty, and I think many of you have in terms of what you've tasted and what we've released. So 2019, super classic vintage. The 2013 Malbec, taking a step back again, that was the first wine that I aged in neutral wood, but those were small barrels. This is aged in Bodhi. So that out of that 2013 experiment came, me looking for larger cooperage, which was unheard of at that point in the New World and that. And so eventually going into Europe, bringing back in 2017, a container of the larger Bodhi that we have, the 5,000 liter, 1,300 gallon, and then a 400 gallon, 1,500 liter. So anyway, this is a wine that speaks to that. So we'll go ahead and smell and taste that. Take our first spin. It's interesting. So Malbec is what built the reputation of Bordeaux. If you look at pre-phylloxera, the insect ravaging Europe in the late 1800s, early 1900s, both sides of the river in Bordeaux, what's called the Omedoc on the west side or west bank, which is sand and gravel soils, and then on the east bank, right bank, clay and limestone, what they call terra rosa. Those wines were all anchored by Malbec with other varieties blended in. With phylloxera and some grafting issues and other issues with Malbec in that, as well as a very famous frost in 1956 that took out a lot of the Malbec vineyards. Malbec pretty much was pushed out of Bordeaux with rare exception in that. And so the area really kind of holds fame today as the Cahors region, which goes back hundreds of years south of Bordeaux up against the Pyrenees a little bit. And those wines, we've talked about this before, were wines that were so highly valued that they're one of the few wines that was put on a wagon and actually transferred somewhere. Really, wine was something that was so heavy it was only moved by water unless it was a very famous wine. And we know that what they called the black wines of Cahors, which were Malbec-based wines, were wines that were taken into Paris and were consumed by nobility long before the trains and the canals that Napoleon put in and that. So anyway, there's a beautiful smell to Umpqua Valley Malbec, and I say mulberry. It's this black fruit. Sometimes Europeans will say like cassis or whatever, and it's like a black fruit, but it's not sweet the way like a blackberry is. It's kind of a sweetness to it. You think about like cassis liqueur that almost has like a green note to it of like some type of like a mulberry vegetation or something that's so beautiful. And this has that along with like a little beautiful spice, and that spice comes from a little barrel as well as grape. This is 100% Malbec, so it's nothing that's blended in, but we oftentimes will see this sweet spice, and I pick up a little bit of that balsam again, kind of that fingerprint of Hillcrest. So 2019. Beautiful vintage, very bright, plays into a classic style of winemaking, meaning the wines retain nice acidity, you don't have really high alcohol, no heat whatsoever. The wine, having spent 5 years, is very elegant, delicate, but you taste it and you feel this kind of weight go down and this kind of creamy texture, and then beautiful acidity up on the sides. I still get quite a bit of this really bright, fresh acidity. It's interesting, if you look at Australia, or not Australia, but Argentinian Malbec, oftentimes they're very low acid, and they're very sweet and they're beautiful, but they're very soft. Classic Malbec ages a long time because of the acidity. Once again, looking at Cahors and Bordeaux, Old Bordeaux. This wine very much carries that, and I still might find myself tasting that like mulberry fruit, but I also get this like beautiful acidity. I'm still salivating in anticipation of it. So super beautiful wine. Something this summer would be great. You know, a lot of grilled foods, not sauced up or anything like that, but beautiful steak, grilled chicken, even something like that. Something with some strong flavors to it. Next, we're going to do something. This is a variety I've had on and off. So I've been in the business now almost 40 years, and I've had it a handful of times, usually in Italy. And this is a variety that goes way back into northern Italy. It's a variety that we know comes out of the Piemonte region. So that's where Barolo Barbaresco is produced by the city of Alba. And it's actually, one of its parents is Nebbiolo. And so it has a lot of the same characteristics, but then it is very exaggerated in a couple areas that a lot of Nebbiolo lacks. And it's called Vespolina. And Vespolina is grown only in 2 areas that I know of, actually in the world. One is the Piemonte region, of course, and then Lombardy. And Lombardy is by Genoa, so that would be on the northwest coast of Italy. It makes a wine that we know. And people talk about this, if you read like comments, it tends to be a little bit lighter in color, the way Nebbiolo is. Tends to be beautiful acidity. People say it's kind of soft and easy, but that's not the grape. And there are other grapes that are like this, and one that's related to it, Fresia, which is a variety that Nebbiolo is a parent of, and is the variety that built the reputation of Barolo and Barbaresco. Those wines used to be Fresia-based and not Nebbiolo-based. But anyway, today it's actually made where, and this is the only grape I really know that people do this to, it's incredibly tannic. And so they'll typically, the few producers that make it will bring it in, ferment it, but not let it finish fermenting. Maybe let it only sit there for 6-7 days on the skins, sometimes as short as 3 days, they say, and pull it off. But what you get is you get this beautiful, creamy richness in the mouth. Nice acidity. If you pull it off the skins a little bit earlier, you don't see the tannin, so lighter tannin in that, but you get this really beautiful crushed red fruit perfume. And that's where it's oftentimes added to Nebbiolo. If Nebbiolo doesn't have that generosity, it actually has the same generosity as like really silky Pinot Noir. And so that's something that's kind of blended in, and you'll see that when you taste the wine. It has just this exotic bouquet. Sometimes it even has a little mushroom or a little bit of herbal note to it, but it has this beautiful fruit always. So let's take this guy for a spin. It's 23 vintage, and this is out of an area called GENAU. And GENAU is, so we know Barbaresco and Barolo are the 2 communes near Alba, once again in northern Italy, that produce these very famous wines. Probably 2 of the most famous, if not the most famous wines in Italy. But there are 2 areas to the north of that, Gattinar and GENAU, that were actually more famous than Barolo and Barbaresco at one period of time, for Nebbiolo as well as for Vespolina. And that's where this producer is. They produce some Nebbiolo, but this is actually a variety that they're very, very well known for. But once again, there's a handful of producers in the world. I talk about as you come up to the glass, I mean, savory. It's a fresh, red, bright fruit. And my not the smell of it, but what it does to my palate is like pomegranate juice. When you smell pomegranate juice, there's that really beautiful, bright red fruit. Very gentle on the palate. You get a little bit of some tannin, but they're very fine, but I actually feel them coated many places. This wine was only on the skins for about 7 days, and then was aged in a neutral vessel for 6 months. So this is a little bit like sashimi. This is just plating it and just kind of seeing, which once again is a real treat, because it's just so hard to find this variety, and to see it all by itself, kind of very light fingerprint of winemaking is very nice. Very long again. This is a great wine for summer. This is a wine that I wouldn't have with anything too heavy in that, but once again, grilled lighter foods, fish would be beautiful with this actually. But the grilled chicken, grilled pork kind of thing, just super beautiful. And actually a very, very fresh variety. Would be great with cheeses too. I think like hard cheeses and that, this would be spectacular. So hopefully you enjoy that, and I'd love to hear in the comments section from anyone that has tasted it. To finish up with, so we're going to revisit the GENAU Riesling. It's 2022, and this is a wine I thought of for many years before I produced it. So I make this wine at the same winery that we produce the Fuder, and Fuder comes off of a very particular vineyard called Trittenheimer Apotheca that has a blue slate that gives you a flavor unlike any other vineyard I know of in the Mosel or really in the world. And I know many of you are fans of that, and that's spectacular. This comes from a vineyard not too far from there that's more gray slate. It tends to be, it has that beautiful clean, like unripe stone fruit character that you see in great Riesling, but tends to be a little softer, a little bit easier, not as kind of pungent in that. And so it's something I wanted to make something that you could drink that's so beautiful in the summer. But you know, there's some wines that you talk about and go, these first two wines to me are wines that if you're drinking them and talking to someone else and somebody pours you some, you'd say, stop, what is that wine? Oh, I'm interested. The GENAU is just beautiful. It's the kind of thing, you know, when friends are over and you're having a bottle of white at the back end, or the first bottle that you have, it's just meant to be so pleasing and beautiful. So beautiful, like kumquat, that real pungent kind of almost squashy kind of sweet smell to the fruit. Not sticky sweet, but just really intense. Nice, rich right off the bat. The tension, this wine's really changed a lot in the last year. You see the acidity and the little bit of sweetness, and they're really kind of matched up. Actually, I get like a citrusy component in the back end. I think of almost like grapefruit. That's kind of this nice kind of drying character with the flavors persisting. So I think a real drinker for the summer. So with that, we always say thank you so much for sharing in our dream, our family's dream, as we move into the second and pretty soon maybe the third generation of family winemaking here at Hillcrest. And we're honored to take on Richard's legacy and the greatness that Richard brought to the American wine scene and the Oregon wine scene and the Umpqua Valley wine scene. But we appreciate your support of making that dream come true. So to the genie in the bottle, and we'll see you next year. Cheers.